This must be BBC.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
But sowing the seeds of love. Tears of Fears sounds really good. Have a good one. I'm going to try videoing, so I might sit on the end.
These Tony's coming today.
It's driving me mad. Oh, it's just another way of passing the day. I get so lonely when she's not there.
There was the one piano in this house, and as soon as class was finished, there would be a scramble to occupy it. You could sometimes reserve it, but often it was just a free-for-all. So I used to crawl through the food hatch sometimes to see if I could beat the others.
Peter and I in particular used to play together. We used to play old soul numbers in the main, Otis Redding stuff, Wilson Pickett, things like Benny King. And I don't know, I always thought Pete had a great voice for that kind of material. I mean, he always wanted to play the piano as well, actually, you know, but I managed to get there first, so I did that.
Am I very wrong to hide behind the glare from an open mind and stare?
And there was a strange character called Peter Gabriel who was a very placid, very, very ordinary, very quite normal chap who would just suddenly jump on tables and start singing, which is quite out of character. He was a drummer, in fact, to start with. People don't realise this, but in fact, he lent the anon of our first... he used to let us borrow his drums, and he used to come along and look extremely nervous.
My drums were my pride and joy, you know, when I was a teenager. It's very strange because the bass drum from that kit, I've just pulled out again, and it's a small bass drum. Has a really great, very hip sound.
I was banned from playing the guitar throughout my entire career there. I'm not quite sure why. I guess maybe at that stage, pop music was a sort of a symbol for the revolution that was about to overthrow the establishment and bring the country down. It was kind of two camps, actually. Me and Ant and Tony and Peter. And we were in rival groups at one point, remember that? We were called the Anon. Tony and Peter had a group called the Garden Wall, who were a bit jazzy. And I thought were not really kind of rock and roll. They appeared a little bit twee to me.
And Jonathan King was an old boy at the school, and one day, on the old boy's day, he tended to like to turn up. So we just thrust a tape on him.
As I got into Cambridge, I started succeeding in music. So I returned here after my first year at Cambridge with a #1 hit under my belt, and was approached by this little sprout who I'd never seen before, because you never mix with anyone like a year or two younger than you. And he gave me this tape, so I said, "Who's it by?" And he said, "Oh, but I haven't got a name yet." So I listened to it foolishly, which a mistake I would never make in these advanced years, and thought it was absolutely fabulous, because I thought the guy had a great lead voice and they were really interesting songs. So I named them Genesis, recorded them, and I might as well leave now.
We got more and more involved in doing sort of slightly what you might call more typical later Genesis stuff. But he wasn't really into that, and we realised we were losing him. So Peter and I very specifically sat down one day and wrote a song tailor-made to Jonathan King's tastes, and his favourite group at the time were the Bee Gees. So we wrote a sort of Bee Gee pastiche song, you know, which was called The Silent Sun, and he loved it.
The silent sun that never shines, she is the warmth of my lonely heart.
So I did my best Robin Gibb impersonation on one of the demo tapes, and that allowed us through to the next leg, where we thought we could get into the studio. It was also exciting at that point, and I remember when we first saw an ad in the record Mirror for Silent Sun, you know, I cut it out and stuck it on my school books. It was a big moment.
Baby, you've changed my life. I'm trying to show you.
I still believe that some of those early songs could be smash hits. The Silent Sun particularly is a gorgeous song. A lot of people in those days said it was a bit of a Bee Gees pastiche. Actually, that's totally wrong, because it was really before the Bee Gees and before the Crosby, Stills and Nash thing that they were doing this kind of sound. And I also think Peter's voice was so individual and the lyrics were so different from anything that anyone else was writing. I think if somebody else picked up some of those songs and covered them, they'd have smash hits. They are available through John Joe Music, phone number at your local BBC station.
We needed a name for The Silent Sun. We wanted to put it out as a single. No one had a good idea. Between ourselves, we couldn't agree. One come to mind, which in fact was one of Ant's ideas, which I think tells us a little about the era, which was the Champagne Meadow. I remember that. So I'm very glad that wasn't it.
I think I've got a soft spot for Jonathan, I think, because looking back, I mean, to make a few record now, a single or a few tracks, is not a big deal. In those days, to make an album for a bunch of guys who were at school, sort of 15, 16, 17, and couldn't really play very well, to go in and get a record deal, it only 3 days to make the album, was actually quite an achievement.
I had this brilliant idea to call it From Genesis to Revelation and not have an artist name on it. This was a terrible mistake, because it got bumped in all the religious bin of all the record shops and nobody ever heard it.
I think a lot of his influence was good. I mean, there's no doubt that some of the tracks we were doing were unwieldy and too naive, but nevertheless, I think that he wanted to turn us into too much of a poppy outfit.
In 1970, Genesis signed to Tony Stratton Smith's Charisma Records. He paid the band a wage of £10 per week and took a very close interest in their career, encouraging Genesis to develop their live act.
Tell me my life is about to begin. Tell me that I'm a hero.
By the time we came around to doing Trespass, the second album, we'd done a certain amount of live playing, and we'd written loads and loads of material, and the whole idea of the band had completely transformed from being a band that was trying to have a hit single to a band that was trying to do something adventurous musically.
I started getting bad stage fright, which sort of came from nowhere, really. I mean, I'd started off by being pretty confident. In fact, at the start, Peter was the one that used to be really quite... I mean, it seems extraordinary to think at one stage that one of the roadies was going to have to do the announcements because Pete just couldn't handle it at the beginning. Eventually, I got physically sick. I got bronchial pneumonia, and the doctor advised me to clear out.
We thought that if one of us left, we couldn't carry on. And I reckon the closest we came to busting up was when Anthony left.
I did suggest at the time that we looked for a new drummer because I thought it was important that we ought to try and get a drummer who was kind of equal stature.
We're waiting for you. Come and join us now. We need you with us. Come and join us now.
Do you remember the first time you met Phil, and what was he like?
Very...
You were going to say cocky, weren't you?
He was cocky. Confident.
I thought this is not what I'm used to. I've never been anywhere like this before. And of course, they had the grand piano out on the patio. There was a sunshade for you to put your drums underneath. There was a swimming pool, and I was early, as usual. And one of the guys said, why don't you just go and have a swim? Well, we've got 10 guys ahead of you, so why don't you just go and have a swim? So I went and had a swim. Meanwhile, I was listening to all the other guys audition because it was open air. It was in the back garden. So by the time I came out to do my bit, I knew all the pieces. I knew all the audition pieces. And I waltzed through it.
The way he sat down at the kit, I knew he was a good drummer before he played a note.
I must admit, I'm not flattered, but no, I mean, there was, I think little doubt at the end of that session that Phil was the best. I mean, certainly Peter and I felt that. And
The rest was so terrible.
Split decision. When I joined the band, I was kind of the only one that didn't have a public school education. I was the grammar school boy. Actually, stage school, really. I mean, I stopped going to grammar school when I was 14 and went to stage school.
Dad, you said I could have a cow of my own. Can I have this one?
Oh, now, hold on. I'm in one of our herd.
You said I could choose.
Yes, you did. That's right, Dad.
So I was kind of class clown, and when I joined the band, there was an awful lot of friction that I guess came from the background that the guys had.
He found himself with an accolade he'd not beheld before. Where are you, my father? Give wisdom to your son. And as his strength began to fail, he saw a shimmering lake.
Must have spent a fortune on these 1 and 6-penny ads, so I stuck one in that said guitarist writer seeks receptive musicians determined to strive beyond existing stagnant music forms. And I thought, well, if that doesn't ring a bell with somebody, at least I'll get someone who's idealistic, even if they're completely bonkers.
Another dream had been fulfilled at last. Forever still beneath us.
something in the wording of it that made me curious. You know, a lot of the other guitarists we were coming across were into notes and flash and all that stuff. And Steve was into atmospheres, and that's what attracted us.
I felt, you know, the kind of delicate pastel shading acoustic aspect that the band did was very, very good. But then when the band was supposed to sort of rise into an area of some power, I felt that that was an area that I warmed to, the fact that, you know, there was some aggression in my playing that I felt I could put that stamp on it in a way.
In 1971, the musically ambitious Nursery Crime was released. It was greeted with indifference by the music press and the public, and Genesis had to accept second best as their stablemates Lindisfarne had a #1 hit with Fog on the Tyne. But unexpectedly, Nursery Crime entered the Italian top 10, forging a special relationship between Genesis and their Italian fans that has stretched to this day.
At the time, the album didn't sell particularly well, so it's only in retrospect, or it's only as an archive item that it became a heavy seller, apart from one territory, which was Italy.
Well, you folks agree with that one?
We like audiences that sit down and listen to the music rather than get drunk and pick up girls and...
Big ones.
Big ones. Bogo de Kazuna. Kazuki. We like audiences that sit down and listen to us.
And we like the words, the music, the arrangements, all democratic. Yes, oh yes, that's right. Yes, quite often. About 5, 6 or 10 times a week.
And in those days, no one really liked us, apart from the Italians, so the more time we could spend there, the better, the more we were cheered up.
Fantasy, I think.
Where do you think the inspiration?
Dove trovate l'ispirazione per I vostri testi? Quasi sempre l'ispirazione ci viene dall'anima.
So what we do is we check out the reading of the song.
Di qui, dalla lettura dell'anima che ascoltiamo con un orecchio.
1972 witnessed a turning point in the band's fortunes. Peter Gabriel's bizarre interest in mime and theatrical spectacle was beginning to give Genesis a distinctiveness missing in their earlier years.
I mean, there was some encouragement in the early days. There was a few people who liked us, you know, as I say. And I think really what we were able to bypass a little bit, the fact that we weren't critically very well received, by the fact that I think Peter and his costumes and stuff started to get us a bit of attention, you know. When he first put on these sort of the dresses and foxes' heads and everything, and we suddenly started getting a picture in the paper, you know.
The first gig I remember of that tour was actually in a boxing ring in Dublin. It's not the sort of place one would normally expect to go and perform in a red dress, but it was. I remember just the moment when I walked out with this costume on, and there was a real sense of shock and horror in the audience, and I thought, oh, this is good. Try a bit more of this.
in order to get the kind of variety of sound we were looking for, it used to take us a very long time to set up between songs. And so we used to, when we first went on stage, we had these sort of embarrassed silences.
And I used to go crazy because everyone would look at me as the front man in these long pauses while these guitarists were sort of endlessly twiddling their tuning devices.
So he'd start to tell stories, you know, which sometimes are totally irrelevant to the song.
Within seconds, the entire clean, green, smooth surface of the park was a mass of dirty, brown, writhing objects. Old Michael continued to rub his flesh into the ground. This time he looked even happier, and he whistled a little tune. It went like this. Faster, Phil. And then... This, to us, was perhaps Jerusalem boogie, but to the birds it meant supper is ready.
Sitting beside you, I look into your eyes as the sound of motor cars fades in the nighttime. I swear I saw your face change. It didn't seem quite right.
Quite often when you're playing in a university bar, they have not the slightest interest in what these musicians are doing up on the stage, so somehow you've got to get their attention and hold it.
Don't you know our love is true?
Our production budget was about £20 a year, so it was very limited as to what he could do.
A flower. Will fall to look for butterfly, butterfly, butterfly.
I think the flower mask had come from watching Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, when I was a kid. And Willow Farm, which was in the centre of Supper's Ready, was somewhere where I just tried to explore this unreal world of English subconscious.
This Winston Churchill dressed in red, he used to be a British man, dressed in red, what a dread! The frog was a prince, the prince was a prince, it was an egg, the egg was a bird. Run away, you little thing, and all in the toilet. Haven't you heard? We're gonna play with the human being. Yahoo! This fish, the geese, the king in the morning. Everything, we're growing everything. We got some in, we got some out. But wild things floating about.
Supper's Ready was extremely important to the band because, in a way, that was a sort of centerpiece for our ambitions in terms of writing. Because, you know, whatever else was going on in the visual department, our central interest was always, and probably is still, the writing, the composition of the music. And that was the most adventurous piece to date.
All right! Feel your body melt. Bump to back to left. Rubbish, rubbish. You're out for the ball. To dance, to dumb, to mum. Mum to be washing, mum to be washing. You're out for the ball. Let me hear you last. Give me some
And now we'd like to take you a little further westward, agriculturally speaking, to where the sweet smell of freshly mown grass pervades our hairy nostrils. Snapping off time for the cosmic lawnmower.
The band consolidated their reputation with the release of the lyrical album Selling England by the Pound. A single from the album, I Know What I Like, reached number 17 in the charts, and at last Genesis seemed to be balancing creative innovation and commercial success.
It's 1 o'clock, and time for lunch. Fandy-damny day. When the sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear them talk. There's always been echo. Take a wake up, you got the tidy room now.
The sense of humour in Genesis was extremely important, particularly to me and I think Phil in some ways, but the tracks Will Have Found Supper's Ready and Harold the Barrel, I think we're trying to follow a tradition of English absurdist humour.
Keep it moving, please, short, I know.
I Know What I Like, too, there was this sense, again, of looking at this of repression in the English psyche. And in the line, me, I'm just a lawnmower, there's a sense of this guy grabbing hold of this lawnmower and mowing the hell out of the grass.
Sunday night, Mr. Farmer called. Said, listen, son, you're wasting time. There's a future for you in the virus get trades up to town. But I remember the boys in the past. Gambling only pays when you're winning. At the bank, old Mr. Winning a thing. Living for a bleep shop, I know.
The whole album's kind of mad, really. And it's surreal. Right from the moment where it starts off, where Pete's singing unaccompanied.
Cried the uniform to his true love's eyes. It lies with me, cried the Queen of Maybe. For her merchandise, he traded in his prize.
The influence of that was the Labour Party manifesto at the time, which was selling England by the pound. And, it was the references are so scattered within that one album and everything, including the album cover painted by a lady called Betty Swanwick, who just died recently. There was something about the whole kind of package that always makes me smile.
Selling England by the pound. Citizens of hope and glory, time goes by, it's the time of your life. Easy now, sit you down, chewing through their wimpy dreams. They eat without a sound, digesting England by the pound. And the land lies down on Broadway. Early morning, Manhattan, ocean winds blow on the land. Movie palaces now run down. The old night watchmen.
All kinds of things come back when you say Land Lies Down Broadway. We did about 98 shows with it all the way across the world. We went to America before the double album had come out. Suicide, we played the whole thing to an audience of people who thought, what the hell's going on? Because Peter was dressing up in extraordinary costumes at this point.
There's something moving in the sidewalk, Steve. And the
I cringe at certain places now when I look back at it. Again, atmospheres were caught in some of the tracks.
something's changed. That's not your face. It's mine.
We had these sort of slides behind us. We had three, triple screen system of slides, which are about 1,000 slides, and they changed throughout the show. We did about 100 shows of Land Lies Down, and I'd say it probably only all worked. Well, it never all worked, actually, came close to all working on about 4 or 5 occasions, and they were great. Unfortunately, every other night there was always something wrong.
At the end of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, we used to have a little flash, and Peter used to appear one side of the stage, because the whole thing's about a split personality going. So Peter was on one side, and the dummy, dressed the same as Peter, was the other side. And so there was this flash, and the strobe would start, and you weren't quite sure which one was real, you know? Anyway, it was the first gig in Europe, and the mixture of flash powder per ratio to explosion was the first time this guy had done it. And he got too much bang and not enough flash. And the most deafening explosion. We just stopped playing. You know, we just looked around at each other, and the audience was stunned. This guy poked his head around the curtain and said, "Sorry!" And I shouted out, "You're fired!"
End of that tour, suddenly the lights go up and there's Peter on one stage singing, and you pan to the other side of the stage and there's a completely naked, big fat roadie.
Jeff Banks, wasn't it?
He's still with us now.
I think it kind of culminated, for me personally, in the Slipperman costume, though, because at that point, like, I was very much, a musician in this band, and and this was starting to piss me off a bit, because Peter wasn't able to get a microphone close enough to his mouth half the time in that costume to actually do what he was supposed to be doing, which was singing, you know.
There was all this big time stuff happening with sort of long tours being planned way in the future, and I just felt I was getting to be part of a machine, and I also, felt I was becoming a sort of stereotype sort of rock star, or falling into wanting that ego gratification. And I didn't like myself, I didn't like the situation then, and I didn't feel free. I had a call from William Friedkin, who was very sort of hot as a director at that time, just after The Exorcist had come out. And he'd read this little story idea on the back of a live album, and liked that, and wanted me as a sort of story ideas person for a film project he was trying to do.
It was an opportunity he felt he couldn't turn down. And at the time, it just was wrong for us to allow people to do things like that. It just would have been totally wrong. I felt that quite strongly.
My first daughter had just been born, and for a while they didn't think she was going to survive. And it was during the making of The Lamb when the band were in Wales, and I was doing these crazy sort of 5-hour drives through the night, thinking my Hillman Imp, and it was sort of through these, I don't know, it was just, I was getting totally exhausted. But for me, there was no question about priorities. And that, I think, pissed off the band too, because I was the first to sort of have a baby, and they, didn't have any understanding how it changes the way you feel.
He grew up perhaps quicker than the rest of us, really, in a sense, at that time, and he wanted a bit more time than we felt we could give. The rest of us were totally committed to it, and so he felt he had to leave. I had long talks with him about it, because obviously we came into the group as sort of like best friends and everything, and him leaving was a big blow to me personally.
His last gig with the band was in Besançon, in France, and it was supposed to be Toulouse, but because of lack of interest, there were no tickets had been sold, so the concert was cancelled. And we were backstage at the dressing room in Toulouse, in Besançon, and someone said, "We're not playing tomorrow night, so this is the last night." And it was terribly anticlimactic, because we all built up to this last night with Peter, that it was going to be a great show, and then suddenly this was going to be the last night, and we weren't prepared for it. So he played the last post on the oboe, and we went on stage and did The Lamb. Extraordinary, really.
And the light dies down, on
Gabriel's successful solo career has been a unique musical exploration. Influenced by American soul and the diverse sounds of African and Latin music, he has become an influential figure in the spread of world sounds. In 1986, he set up Real World Studios, which houses WOMAD, the World of Music, Arts and Dance, an organisation that promotes multicultural arts in the West.
I think the fact of him coming back into Genesis, which I get asked daily when I'm on the road, especially. No, I don't think that'll ever happen. We could get together for a special one-off, but we haven't, and we're not.
Gabriel did rejoin Genesis on one occasion at a special fundraising show for WOMAD at Milton Keynes. In 1982, Gabriel had helped organise the first WOMAD festival at Shepton Mallet with musicians and dancers from 25 countries. It was a critical and artistic success, but a financial disaster.
And it looked as if we were going to go bankrupt. There was a lot of pressure. I had sort of threats against my life and people, really nasty phone calls to the family, and it was just a horrible experience. Tony and the band then really proposed this thing to bail me out. So it was a very generous thing, and although I had no wish really to relive my past or go backwards with Genesis, I was really touched that they were prepared to help out.
It's been a long, long time.
It rained all day long. Actually, my memories about that day are very vague because it was a little bit of a sort of a dream. We hadn't rehearsed enough for the show really. And I think Pete came on in a coffin, if I remember. But he wasn't wearing a dress. That much I know. I'm actually very pleased we never recorded it or filmed it, because I think for those that were there, it was a great evening. But to actually watch it back in the cold light of day, I'm sure there were rough edges and wrong notes and dodgy bits.
It was just a big mud bath out there, but I think the audience were also wallowing in nostalgia in the same way that we were. So it was musically not as strong as I'd hoped it might be. Didn't quite grab the magic. But it was still a very friendly sort of reunion.
Despite his personal solo success, fans around the world still hope that Gabriel will return to the fold and rejoin Genesis.
You could have a steam train if you just lay down your tracks. You could have thought of the life in the city of gold. You'd left it let nobody know. Gone were the towers you had known from a child, along with the dream of a life. You traveled the wide open road, the blinkered arcade, in search of another to share in his life. Nowhere, everyone looked so strange to him. They got no horns and they got no tail. They don't need no existence. Am I wrong to believe in the city of gold that lies in the distance? They crying, where does they let him away to a cage? Beast that can talk, read the sign.
I think Trick of the Tail was an important album because it was more transitional in the way, kind of reshuffled, different people writing. And I think what I remember about that is going into Trick of the Tail, which is the first one without Peter, slightly apprehensive. Because we all thought, well, we felt confident, we thought we were going to, but there was a question mark there, as to how the writing would go.
Holy moly, girl, you got to go faster than that to get to the top. Dirty old bounty, no buttery smoke. She can turn you to stone. You better start doing it right. You better start doing it right. Halfway down, but back on your back, it's turning you around. Throw it away, don't leave it up there. But remember, you don't know what
seems so obvious now, doesn't it? You know, you had a singer in the group and everything already. But, you know, I mean, Peter had all sorts of things that sort of came with him, and it was just like thinking of Phil. I don't know, I mean, I wasn't sure.
I've been waiting here for so long.
Phil always had a lovely voice for sort of soft stuff, but he had no ability, at the time he'd never sung anything hard at all. You know, we had no idea how he'd cope with a hard song, really.
I was the last person that anybody thought I was going to sing. I'd always been singing with the band, and I'd always done the backups on the albums. I've always felt the singer was the cheapest gig in the band, because all they had to do was look good and wiggle their bum. That's the way I used to look at singers. And so I never wanted to be a singer. I always wanted the most respectable gig in the group, which was, of course, the drummer, you know. I felt that the drummer was the goalkeeper of the group. It was, you could have a bad band with a good drummer and it would still sound good. So when he left and we started to get singers down, I used to stand there and teach them the melody, you know. We used to audition these people every Monday for I don't know how many weeks. Felt like an eternity. And then my first wife at the time, you know, she said, why don't you become the singer? And the thought horrified me of coming out from behind the drum kit, you know, and wiggling my bum and sort of doing everything that I said I wouldn't do. So anyway, I suggested this to Tony and Mike and Steve, and they were very surprised at my suggestion, and they also were a bit dubious as to whether I'd better carry it off or not.
The path is clear, all our eyes can see. The course laid down long before. And so gods and men, the sheep remain inside their pen. Though many times they've seen the way they lead. He rides majestic past hordes of men who cannot or gaze with joy.
The first gig was strange because I've been so used to just looking up and seeing Peter there, and I got a certain confidence of seeing Peter.
You had to look down then, didn't you?
Yes, I feel like I was looking down, you're right. And it just seemed so funny. And it also, you just didn't know really how the audience were going to react, because you thought that they were going to miss him and everything. Miss Peter, I mean. And it was very strange. About halfway through the show, I suddenly realised this was going to work. I mean, he had his own approach to the audience, but they sort of seemed to like him, you know, which was curious, you know.
But it's you talked about it in third person, actually, just sitting here.
Yeah, it's like,
I remember London, Ontario was the gig, and I just remember being more worried about what I was going to say to the audience than anything else, because Peter did have was a communication, and although it was more of a mysterious traveller than a bloke next door or a mate, he did communicate with an audience, and I thought that was very important. So I was more concerned about that aspect of it working than actually singing the song.
We're going to try together, all of us, to levitate the entire Wembley Stadium complex. Everybody hands in the air. Now the next thing is everybody go with me. Come on, come on. I think I felt something moving. Yes, I think something's happening.
I think because Phil had come from within the group, I think people were very forgiving. And also, in fact, I think musically the band sounded better than ever.
Angels never know it's time to close the book and gracefully decline. The song has found a tale. My, what a jealous fool is she. The face in the water looks up. She shakes her head as if to say that the blue girls have all gone away.
Although they're rarely in the hit parade, Genesis are a supergroup, one of perhaps 5 groups in the world that always sell out, one of the few bands that can even fill the huge American halls. The millions of fans are there for more than just the sound. 200 jumbo jet lights change exactly to the music. The special effects would make a Hollywood mogul proud. The amplifiers are loud enough to drive 10,000 neighbours wild.
In America, it was rather because we had our biggest shows. We happened to play sort of fairly biggish places, but getting tiny audiences in them. And of course, that's a recipe for disaster. You're losing money left, right, and centre.
You might not have heard of them, but they have a massive following among the young that take rock music seriously.
There's the one year, though, that we found out afterwards that one of our 19-year-old road managers was managing us for a year, and we spent everything we'd earned. But, of course, he hadn't kept any receipts, and so that was quite a big blow. Adrian?
Imagine approaching the taxman after a US tour that lost a fortune, you know, genuinely, but obviously did earn quite a lot at the same time. And he had a couple of garage receipts and one hotel.
Looking for someone.
Tony Smith promoted the band's first major tour in 1973. He uncovered the extent of their financial and technical disarray.
First date was in Glasgow, and I arrived up in Glasgow to see them, and total chaos on the stage, absolute chaos. And finally, we had to cancel the show because they had something like 400 volts of electricity running through every single piece of equipment on the stage. Just could not walk on the stage. And I had to cancel the show in Glasgow, which is not the easiest of places to cancel shows.
Do you want to go on the bus, or are you going to go to the Mayfair and pick up the bus, or are you going to drive all the way out there?
I mean, yeah,
the Mayfair's very nice.
Yes, it may be, but
drive
a
up to
little bit
London.
quicker than your bus can.
Drive all the way to London.
To the traffic.
It's very nice. It's
So-
pretty.
Get stuck, no, it will.
Towards the end of the tour, they came to me and said, well, you know, you're saying we should get a manager, why don't you do it? So I said, okay. And that's when my trouble started.
Well, as long as it all... I mean, I'm not being argumentative. I'm just saying there's no point in us being there. If we have to do something, then we have to make sure we're there in time to do it.
But I try to understand the best all of my life.
We've always argued and discussed, and that's why you're in a group. And if you don't like that, you leave groups. Peter left, and Steve left for different reasons.
Dark and grey, an English film, the Wednesday play. We always watch the Queen on Christmas Day. Won't you stay?
It was funny because he just didn't turn up one day when we were doing the mixing of Seconds Out, I suppose it was. Yes, the live album, you know. So he didn't turn up, so we mixed him out for the rest of the album, and that was it, really. No, he just, I don't know, I wasn't really expecting it, actually. I was kind of surprised, because on Wind and Wuthering, I felt he did some of the best writing contribution he'd ever done for us.
I managed to let off steam by doing a solo album, which was successful. And it created a difficult situation within the band because the band perceived it as a threat. So there was pressure on me to give up the solo career. And I said, fine, okay, provided a percentage of what I do is done by the band. And the band said, well, we don't really do things like that. We do it by committee. So it was a very difficult decision, and it took me over 2 years of agonizing about that decision, but I felt that the band was no longer a healthy musical climate for me.
I always felt that Steve's strong point was as a guitarist, strongest point, I think, more than as a writer. And I don't know if he ever really could see it that way in a sense, but I mean, he had some very original sounds and an original way of playing.
In the studio, Genesis had shrunk to 3, but for live performances they drew on outside talent. In 1977, the ex-Weather Report drummer Chester Thompson was recruited, and in the following year, top American guitarist Darryl Sturmer joined the band.
Stay with me, my love. I hope you'll always be right here by my side. If ever I need you, oh my love, in your arms I feel so safe and so secure. Every day is such a perfect day to spend along with you. I will follow you. Will you follow me?
Then there were 3 was a very pleasurable experience, which was the first album when there was a 3-piece. You had one guy who sort of sang and drummed, another guy who did all the guitars and basses, another guy who did all the keyboard work, which even at that stage was starting to be quite an expansive role because it would sort of go into the world of drums and guitars and things quite a bit. And I think between us we felt very complete, you know, certainly from the point of view of a studio band.
Nacquero sul finire degli anni 60 per iniziativa di 2 aristocratici studenti inglesi.
Follow You, Follow Me was the first hit single we had, and it sort of doubled the sale of the album. I think also being a romantic song, and we weren't known for romantic songs, the main difference in our audience is suddenly it became a lot more females came to see the group.
Before that, it was just spotty guys with fishing hats and long coats that wanted your album. Can you sign this, Phil? You know, that's really was that. I mean, Genesis fans in the 70s were, you know, college students, and they were mainly guys. It was a very masculine band. We used to play songs that were actually a bit too demanding for some of the females of the audience. I don't mean that sounds chauvinistic, you know, but just that they wanted something else, and we weren't giving it to them. There was a young girl that used to follow us around everywhere, from Watford, who was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And we all our times were hanging out, but she never ended up going with anybody. She was just a big fan of the music, you know. But no, I'm afraid we didn't rape and pillage our way across the world. Yet. I really genuinely thought that the punk thing was a good idea, you know, or not a good idea, it was a good thing that it happened, because it was like someone shaking a tree and all these things that fell off, all these bands that fell off like bad apples, you know. I mean, I didn't hate them, you know, I'm just saying that I would personally have preferred to have been stuck on a desert island with a Sam and Dave album, or an Otis Redding album, or Aretha Franklin, down a Pink Floyd record or a Yes record, you know. That's what I was listening to.
Many too many have stood where I stand.
See, most of the bands that were being slagged off as being dinosaurs and boring, I thought were boring as well. And so when someone else comes along and says, all that lot are rubbish, they're all crap and all boring old farts, you know, I'm saying, yeah, they are actually, you know. And then suddenly we're mentioned in the same mouthful. I think, well, that's a drag, you know, because I saw different things in our music.
Leave the stage. Maybe that's because you securely locked me up, threw away the key. On my line, because would you find the key? Oh, in my mind,
I stopped reading it now. Actually, I've stopped reading press because it's too depressing.
Must be some kind of mistake.
I think anyone who says that they don't care is kidding themselves, really. It's natural to want everyone to like you. I think what was tough was in those early days. It's changed now, thank God. The music papers, the three, the Melody Maker, the NME, and the Sounds, it was. That was about all there was, you know, in England. And if they didn't like you, then you really were in trouble.
There must be some misunderstanding.
If you wanted to get a good review of a Genesis album, it can't be that difficult. There are an awful lot of people out there who like us, so it must be possible to find them.
From all the Genesis fan club, I mean, an enormous number of people all over Europe, really. Yeah. I don't know if you can see this. Happy Easter from all the Genesis fan clubs. It's
Isn't that nice?
Fabulous. Looks very nice. I don't quite know what it is.
Good grief! It's oh no! I can't do You're supposed to be the blackest feet in the cosmos. Go out there and frighten people. There go the boys. Must be some kind of mistake.
Well, we've never been fashionable, you know. The only time we ever became remotely fashionable was when Peter left, and we were the underdogs.
Oh, there must be some misunderstanding.
I find it frustrating that you can't get back at these people. And a lot of the abuse nowadays, or in recent history, has come from on personal matters, you know, about what I look like, as opposed to what the music's like, you know. And I kind of find that very frustrating.
NME was interesting because it was so vicious, you know, and it wasn't just vicious to us, it was vicious to hundreds of people.
One of the things that criticism that's been levelled at us from our own fans, as well as everybody else, has been the fact that we are now having hit singles wherever they are, being whatever country of the world, and we've sort of sold out, you know. I don't think we have sold out at all. Our music is just reaching more people because more people like it. More people are playing it on the radio. We've always written 3 or 4 minute songs, but people never played them on the radio because they figured that we were an albums group, you know. And also they probably weren't very good 3 or 4 minute songs, some of them, so they probably didn't deserve to be played, I don't know. But we've always tried to write singles, we've always tried to do that, and now we're just doing it better, I suppose.
The release of Duke in 1980 signalled a new and more commercial era. The success of shorter and more accessible songs scotched rumours that the band were disintegrating and spending too much time on solo projects.
People still come up to me and they say, "Are you breaking up?" You know. They still can't understand that it's possible to do more than one thing musically. You know, if you think about it, being in a group's actually a bit unhealthy once you've got past the initial sort of 5 years and just to get the group going and get playing together. It's a strange life, the idea of just you play with 3 or 4 other guys and that's all you do.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, I've been waiting for this moment all my life. Oh Lord.
In 1978, when I broke up, I sat down with the band and said, you know, if we can exist with me in Vancouver, which is where my family had gone to, we still had a band, but if not, then I've left because my family was obviously more important. The other guys quite rightly said, now just hang on, you know, we've been thinking about doing something on our own, so why don't we do that while you get yourself sorted out? So Tony and Mike did their first solo albums. And I went to Vancouver, came back, nothing had changed. I found myself back at home 3 or 4 months later. Meanwhile, they were well ensconced in their albums, so I started writing. And that's really how the solo things developed to such an extent.
I was there and I saw what you did. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. So you can wipe off that glitter, know where you've been, solving a pack of lies.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised at how well Face found it. I'm sure Phil was surprised, even more surprised than me. Well, you can't get any more successful, can you? I don't think. I think it's not possible without going into politics. The problem with Phil is that when I think I'm working hard and my schedule's busy and I'm going flat out, I look at what he's doing and I kind of feel I'm having an easy time.
It's the South of France. It's an open air show of the South of France. Every time we mention open air and Genesis in the same breath, it pours the rain. Why me?
Oh, they're doing the documentary.
It's not just rock and roll, see? It's not just playing drums and singing.
He said he wasn't tonight.
Phil is the best. I've never known anybody like Phil. Isn't he the best guy you've ever worked with?
I wish I could relax more. I wish I could actually enjoy doing nothing. If there's a little break between tours, and I really, I can. I mean, I'm quite happy to sit on the kitchen floor with Lily and play with her toys with her and stuff for a few hours. I don't really think I'm a workaholic. I don't think I'm driven to work. Maybe there's a subconscious guilt for the amount of money I'm paid for what I do, that I feel like I should work all the time for it. But no, I don't think I'm driven. I just think I get asked to do interesting things. The homeless issue started to rear its head. Not that it wasn't there already, of course, but it was just the fact that the song was number one, and that people, especially in America, the organisations were saying, can we use the song to show and the video and the song to show and play to Congress, because we summed up in 5 minutes what a lot of people have been trying to do for years. So suddenly I was becoming, if you want, a champion of this cause.
Blames the one before, and all of their frustrations come beating on your door. I know that I'm a prisoner to all my father held so dear. I know that I'm a hostage to all his hopes and fears. I just wish I could have told him in the living years.
The main difference with the Mechanics project is that it's different people involved in it. But working without Phil and Tony, it's like doing the same thing with different people. It comes out so different, you kind of go a different way. I'd done a couple of solo albums prior to the Mechanics, which hadn't done anything at all. The first album came out well. I got lucky. I mean, working with Paul Carrack and Paul Young singing, two great singers, and Adrian Lee on keyboards and Peter Van Hook on drums, we just sort of clicked, We're now on our third album, and I've kind of seen the relationship grow with the people, which is nice. And I think we're kind of developing a bit of a sound and a bit of way of doing things, which is different again from Genesis.
Tony Banks has scored several films and collaborated with artists like Toyah Willcox and Fish of Marillion. In 1989, he released the solo album Bank Statement.
Tony, I would say, is the most important writer in Genesis. That's what, him with Mike is a close second. The most important writers in Genesis in terms of what people like about Genesis. And yet Tony has the least success. But if people knew what he brought into Genesis, they'd probably give his solo work more of a listen.
The Bank Statement record, I was very satisfied with the record. I enjoyed that a lot, and I was actually, must be all honesty, very surprised it didn't do anything at all. I really thought it was going to do something, because I thought it had 2 or 3 songs on it that would have got the attention. But and to be honest, I mean, most people who are watching this, a lot of people I suppose who are watching this who are like Genesis, you know, probably won't have ever even heard of the album, let alone heard it, you know. That's a shame, really, because it is very much part of the sort of, you know, the Genesis kind of world, if you like, and it would be something I think a lot of people could like a lot. I mean, I sing the odd track on my solo stuff, and people find almost those are the easiest tracks to take, because at least they've got some personality to go with it, you know. And yet my voice doesn't compare with the other voices I've used.
Well, it's so easy right up. Ain't no midnight cowboy took his place at the starting line. 'Cause he left you behind with his reputation. Lone Ranger still fresh in our mind.
But I think because we do the solo stuff, individual written material is now well taken care of. And the feeling is that we must keep the group for something that only the group can do, which is writing material together. And we felt over the years, you know, even back in the days when we were writing, perhaps doing more individual stuff, that often the best songs were the ones that were written by the group in the studio. And so when we came in with the album, Abacab in particular, we decided we'd start doing it that way. And we actually wrote it in this room. The whole idea worked really well, and I like Abacab.
I think it's a very important album for us, Abacab, because I think
Nick producer as well, co-producer.
Yeah, I felt we broke with the past. At that moment in time, we were just about to become, as so many groups do, and it's hard not to, a kind of caricature of ourselves. And I think we made an effort not to, and it worked.
After working with Phil Collins on Face Value, producer and engineer Hugh Padgham has become an important figure behind the scenes. He's worked on highly successful albums like Invisible Touch and Abacab, and has brought his experience as a producer with post-punk bands like The Police and XTC to the newer and more commercial Genesis sound.
The last 2, Genesis and Invisible Touch, we started on day 1 with no music at all. It's a fascinating way to record. Everybody would just turn up and we'd set up the gear and they'd just start jamming and just jam for 2 weeks or so, and we just record everything. And then at the weekends or when the guys go home at night, they take home bits and pieces and or cassettes of the stuff, and they'll say, well, maybe this bit will go with that bit, and it evolved. That's how it evolves, and it's a great way to record. Expensive if you haven't got your own studio.
Please
last 3 or 4 albums, we've actually just gone in with no material. We come down here and sit down and just start improvising and messing around and write it together.
It's quite a frightening thing to do in a way, you know, but then I suppose you always know that if it didn't work, you could always, you know, get some material that we've written individually.
Invisible Touch was literally a guitar riff of Mike's. Ding 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 ding. And we picked up on that. I had, for some reason, one of those moments where I start a drum machine, he starts playing, I start singing, and you've got a song, you know. And I started singing She Seems to Have an Invisible Touch. And it seemed to me a very, very strong chorus. It also seemed to me pushing Genesis into a little bit of a slightly R&B area.
I think I probably brought more of a rhythmic thing into the recordings with Genesis, so that the whole sound of the band was probably harder than it was before. I was sick and tired of hearing records in the 70s that sounded like they'd been recorded in cardboard boxes, or cardboard boxes with carpets all over the walls. And to me, when you stand next to a drummer or you go to a gig and hear a band play, the drums are really loud, and if you stand next to a guy drumming, you know, you can't stand it, it's too loud. And I wanted drums to sound like that on a record.
What the drum machine did, to me, was opened up everybody's writing, you know. For instance, in the early days, if Tony was playing us a piece on his own at the piano, they'd both be both hands filling in the rhythm, you know, to give you an idea what it would be like. As soon as you got drum machines, you could play a chord and hang, you know, and it would just, it opened up the writing. So that's a big thing that happened, and it happened with the Duke album, and to some extent, Mama, you know, that whole thing, the atmosphere of the song is there, right there, from as soon as you hear the drum machine. Without it, it's a different song altogether.
Oh, I just can't go away. In the heat, in the steam, in the city, I've got the running, just can't wait. So say you have me, mama, 'cause it's getting so hard. But I know I'm always there. You listen, you teach me, mama, and I know inside you care. So get down now here beside me. How are you going nowhere? No, but it's getting so hard.
How are the rehearsals for the Knebworth concert going?
Finished.
I don't know. We'll tell you after it's happened, yeah?
Oh, you know, we're only actually about 2 hours worth of rehearsing. Considering we haven't played for 3 years, we should have probably done more than 2 hours. But it's like an old pair of shoes. It fits as soon as you put them on.
Did I say I love you? Did I say I care? Did I say
songs are you doing, and why did you choose those ones?
We're doing Turn It On Again, That's All Mama, and Throwing It All Away. Why do we choose them? Well, it's kind of obvious in these situations.
Only 3 or 4 chords in them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cause you know I know that I don't wanna go. Someday when you're sorry, someday when you're free, the memories will remind you that our love was meant to be. But late at night when you call my name, the only sound you hear is the sound of your voice call. Just calling out.
I think a lot of people listen to our stuff with preconceived ideas that in the same way that maybe we would or I would listen to a Grateful Dead album, a band that's been around a long time, you think you know what you're going to get.
I won't be coming home tonight. My generation will put it right. We're not just making promises that we know we'll never keep. Too many men, there's too many people making too many problems, and not much love to go round. Can't you see this is the land of confusion? Now this is the world we live in, and these are the hands we give up. You never let's start trying to make it a place worth fighting for. This is the
Really, Genesis is just a name that the 3 of us go under. You know, we've been through so many changes since the band began. We're writing different kinds of songs than we did then. Everything's different, so there's no reason to suspect that the next album should be the same as the last one. It's a shame that more people don't think.
you keep telling me not everything. You say I got everything I want. You keep telling me you're gonna help me. Yes, you're gonna help me, but you don't.
We haven't made a definitive album. I always say I kind of like to do one. You know, the Floyd have got actually a couple, in fact, probably. And most bands have one of those albums. Actually, maybe not The Who. And I'd like the idea of doing one like that. But then maybe once you do that, you know, what happens next? Which is perhaps why I think it's easier for us to keep going. Still trying to do it. Still trying to get it right.
Yes, I'm gonna make it right. Tonight, tonight, tonight.
I'm not a tremendous fan of what we've done, you know, in all honesty. You know, I don't feel we've got it right yet. There are certain songs on certain albums. I mean, I see Tony and Mike listen to this going, what is he saying? But, you know, on Invisible Touch, there's like 3 or 4 things on there which I really am very proud of, you know. And the more you do it on your own, the more the band has to interest you to go back to it. And it's the fact that we do get it right sometimes. I mean, I think a song like Invisible Touch, for instance, I think is a really great pop song. And I don't mean to demean it by calling it a pop song, but I mean a very good 3 or 4 minute song. There are other things in our past which I'm not particularly proud of. I mean, I guess in some respects I feel I can say that because I'm connected with it. If there's a journalist here saying, why has all the Genesis stuff in the past been so crappy? I'd be there sort of defending it.
The memories. So many. You know, I look back at the history and we're talking about it now, and we're going back over 20 years. And I think, God, I did all that.
I can show you some of the people in my life. I can show you some of the people in my life.
I often feel something of a spectator to it, I suppose, because I'm not I'm no performer. I'm really not a sort of. I'm sure people who've seen me, they know that I'm very static on stage and everything. You know, as I say, my contribution as a writer is not really as in any other role. I do the rest of it well enough, and I've always been dependent on other people to be the sort of the actual communicators to the audience. So I'm sometimes there, and I'm able to just look at it all, you know. And it's extraordinary. I mean, I'm amazed by it sometimes. You see all these people, and they're all sort of shouting, and you know, and it's great. I mean, I love it. I just love people to get pleasure from the music, you know, because that's what you want. I mean, everyone wants to be appreciated. You like to play a song, and you know, and you want people to like it, and a lot of people have them.
Could you do anything for me? Can I touch you for a while? Can I meet you on another day when we'll fly away? I can show you some of the people in my life.
I think Genesis, I suppose, is about a combination of what's now the three of us working together. And it's a very pleasurable thing. You look forward to it. And if the day that stops being pleasurable, I think that's the day Genesis stops.
I'd like to see Peter make more commercial and less artistic records. I'd like to see Phil make more artistic and less commercial records. I'd like Mike to develop, because I think he's developing great in his own right. I'd like Tony to develop into his own solo right, because I think he deserves a lot of things like that. For that reason, I think they've probably got another good 20 years left in them.
It seems I've stayed too long, only thinking about myself. Now I want to spend my life just caring about somebody else. But listen, you know I love you, but I just can't take this. You know I love you, but I'm playing for keeps. Although I need you, I'm not gonna make this. You know I want to, but I'm in too deep. You know I love you, but I
When Charlie Watts was asked what it has been like for 25 years with the Stones, he said, 20 years of hanging about and 5 years of playing, you know. It's not been like that with Genesis. We've worked very long and hard on it. The fact that we are still together and still like each other and can still laugh with each other, I think is a testament to the fact that we do think the world of each other. So I'm thanks for all the good times as opposed to just the music. The music, we keep getting better.